Father, let's pray that you give us understanding tonight and that you have mercy on this country and you raise up some godly leaders. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Randy. If you could join me in a pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. I'd like to take a second to tell you about a new program we have started here, and it's a sponsorship program. And I'd like to see Bruce Rader. Where is he? He's somewhere. Oh, there he is. I'm going to let Bruce say something about his company here, but for $100, you will get a year's worth of advertising in on the website. And we're trying to sponsor local businesses to help offset the cost. So if any of you have a business or anything, or know of a business that might want to have a lot of exposure amongst this group and on the website, contact any board member. We'd be glad to interview them. We want to make sure it's the right kind of business. Obviously, if they're something we stand against, we might not let them sponsor. But I'm going to let Bruce say something about his business here.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you all for coming. And I'm proud to be a sponsor of the Berks County Patriots, and I'm proud to be a member of the Patriots. So again, I thank you all for coming, and that's the name of our company over there on the right, your left, Berks Surveying and Engineering. And thank you so much again. Bye.
Thank you, Bruce. Carol. Look at these nice steps Ellen made. It makes it really nice to come up here, doesn't it? Did not Ellen Kibler do a good job on these steps? Remember what those old things were? Where's Ellen? Give that man a hand. Good carpenter.
Yeah, those steps I can navigate. Okay. We have had our first class in June, our first Constitution class of the new group. And I had several people come to me and say, gee, I missed your class, I'm sorry I didn't get to sign up. You can still sign up, you haven't missed much yet. So if you want to come to the class, you can still sign up. I'm at the table in the back there, you just come on back and talk to me. Also, people that are signed up, I got your email addresses. I have sent out an email. If you did not get the email, come back and see me. There's something wrong with the way I have your address. So let me straighten that out with you so you do get the emails. Our July class will meet on Wednesday, July 9th at 6 p.m. and on Monday, July 14th, either at 3 or at 6. So you have 3 opportunities to make the second meeting. And feel free to join. If you're not sure if you want to join, come to a class and sit in and see what it's like. You can make up your mind then. Maybe you decide this isn't for me. Maybe you decide, gee, I think I'd like to do this. So come on out and join the group. And I want to say that I'm very happy. We actually had more people signed up than I expected. So I was real happy about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. I'm going to ask Linda to come up now and give a membership update, but while she does, Andy, if you can make your way up here, Andy Panafino. Oh, he's not. Never mind, Andy.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Linda Brancadora. I'm membership chairman, and I welcome all of you tonight. How many first-timers? Raise your hand. Good, good, good. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. I have a little story. I have a couple minutes, right? Okay. Some of you come in late, so you don't know the saga of Linda's arm problem, okay? So I'll start out. When the weather broke in spring, I broke my arm, had it in a cast, and of course I took a lot of flack. My husband took a lot of flack, because he's a Marine, for giving me extra special attention, you know, because I couldn't do anything with my hand.
Threw the rest of us under the bus.
You be quiet. Anyway, I got the cast off, and the pain I had in my hand was just tremendous. I don't know. So I went to the doctor, and she told me that she wants to give me some tests. Well, I said, what kind of tests? Well, they stick needles in your arm to see what happens down here. And I said, does it hurt? She said, yes, it does. I said, you'll put me to sleep, right? No. So I thought, oh. So then she said, and when we find out if you have to have an operation or not, you have to sign this waiver that does not guarantee whether it's going to work or not. So I said, now wait a minute, I have to get this straight. You're going to stick painful needles in my arm to find out whether or not I have to have an operation that may not work? Goodbye! But I said, so anyway, the pain has subsided. I wear my carpal tunnel brace, and it's coming along. I'll suffer. I'm old, I have pain, you know, like everybody else, so I'll live through it. I have one other thing to say. And the arm saga is done, okay? I just want to say, a couple weeks ago I wrote an article, and I sat down at the computer one time. Sam went off to play golf, and as a matter of fact, we had a fight before he left. He wouldn't put my socks on, Chuck. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, I sat down and started writing, and everything was flowing out, and I thought, oh my gosh. So I sent it to the board. I thought, I never wrote anything before. Next thing you know, I'm getting emails back. Oh my gosh, this is so great. This is so great. Maybe you'll have to send it to the rest of the membership. So I was shocked. So I said, okay, send it to the membership. That's fine. And so Jamie put it in the on the website and in the newsletter. She put my picture in too, so everybody would know who wrote it. Thank you, Jamie. And I can't tell you how humbled I am from the response that I got. It sort of makes me cry now. Everybody, I mean, the letters and the cards and the emails that I received supporting me in this, and just telling me what a wonderful presentation this was, and just humbled me so much. And I appreciate very much your kind words. And I just thank you all. And I thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you.
Move up, Linda. Judy, you're next. Judy has our events announcements.
Hi, I'm Judy Pelka, the events chairperson. Usually I announce all the upcoming events of the other groups in the area, but instead of taking that time, I decided to print them out. So I put their website address on here, and they're back on the handout table, so you can take them with you. It tells their meeting dates, where they meet, and the web address if you need more information. One event, though, I'd like to just mention to put on your calendars, 11 and 9/12. We're still working on House Bill and Senate Bill 76 for property tax elimination. And David Goldinger is a big advocate of this, and wants to put together a summit with all the groups. And there's going to be a meeting on Saturday, July 19th, 1 to 3 in Lebanon. And it's going to be to come together and come up with a strategy for trying to get this accomplished. So if you need more information, I have, just see me, I'll give you that. And I think that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. There is a lot of good events coming up. Like she said, it's going to be back there. It's too many to announce sometimes, so throw in a card back. Oh, thank you, no. Okay.
On your chairs were a white handout with a lot of words, but we're looking to do a unity night at a Reading Phillies game on July 2nd and we're going to be uniting with the other groups in Berks County. We're just going to show up to the baseball game. There is a game that night. It's a Wednesday night, July 2nd. If you are a veteran, you get in free that evening. And I said, well, what kind of ID do you need? They said, well, we don't really check ID. If you are a senior, you get in for $6. I'm assuming they don't really check ID for senior citizens either, but you know, these are their rules. And if you're not a senior or a veteran, it's $8 for a general admission ticket. We're going to show up, you're going to wear your t-shirts or hats or badges, and just be out in left field and enjoy a game amongst friendly, like-minded folks like us and with the other groups. It's a great night out. The Reading Phillies games are very entertaining. They have their big fireworks night that night because they don't have a game on the 4th. So I'd like each and every one of you to show up to the ball game. They're honoring the veterans at 6 o'clock. You can go down on the field if you are a veteran and get there. The game starts at 7:05. But if you are a veteran, you can get there at 6. Have your picture, have your photo taken by someone out on the field. I hope each and every one of you come out that night and get a chance to drink some beers. No overt politics. I'm sure since we're amongst each other, it'll come up, but we're not selling anything to the other Reading Philly fans that evening. And you're coming there on your own. No one's taking a list. No one's taking your money. It's up to you to get the tickets. It's up to you to get there. Most of the folks in here, it's going to cost $6 or free if you're a veteran. So, and children are $6 too. So, I'd like to see you out there. Thank you. Rod Miller. I don't know if you ever heard Rod talk before. You're going to have a chance now.
Good evening, Patriots. We have a two-part program tonight. The one part on property tax was not necessarily in the flyer, but I'm here to address that. And before I just only focus on the property tax, I want to get around the whole issue here. We have a system that has become so corrupt, both in the nation and in Pennsylvania, that there are reasons we can't get through what we're trying to get done. And I want to touch on some of those before I get into the whole meat. For example, federal corruption. What do we have? Benghazi, Fast and Furious, whoever started that plan. National Security Agency, Veterans Administration, multi-waiting lists, IRS, Lerner's Fifth Amendment approach to that. Tea parties were targeted. 2 years of emails lost. This goes on and on. I don't have time to get into it, but you get my message. This is the unbelief. This Washington crowd has created so much corruption that I don't know how you're ever going to dig out from under it. And the thing about it is, it's all the bureaucrats. It's those high-priced people we pay to these jobs. The politicians aren't the ones we're targeting. We're trying to get to the bottom of it by those people that are hired to do the job and paid well to do the job and protected by a union as they're in the job. We don't touch them, we don't prosecute them, nobody goes to jail, and I promise after 2 years of hire, no one's going to go to jail. It's just the way it is. Okay. I think that as I get angered from all of this, I think of Rush Limbaugh the other day. He said the only problem in Washington is the Tea Parties, and that's about the truth. If we weren't monitoring them, don't tell them how far they go. Okay. So much for Washington. We don't have the hours in a day as volunteers to get on top of all these things. But what can we do something about? Well, let's look at Pennsylvania. The pension crisis, the property tax, welfare reform, right to work and payroll protection. What has Harrisburg done about any of these things? Nothing. You got it. Nothing. Now we're in a budget crisis. Now they're raising the flag. We got to address these. When it becomes a crisis, suddenly, hey, we better do our job. Well, as I said, what did they do to solve the problem? What did they do to cause the problem? They did nothing to solve them. They did everything to cause them. It's like hiring the fox to watch the hen house. They're going to fix what they broke. I tell you, if you want somebody to go along, get along. I'm not the guy who wanted this job anymore. I am not taking any more prisoners. I've had it on both sides of the aisle. These folks are making us play like fools. Just for example, the cost of government. You saw the article in the Eagle, I suppose, the other day. In the Eagle, now, they're talking about the senators and the reps in Pennsylvania. Only New Hampshire has less. New Hampshire, they work part-time, they get $100 a year. Our organization, our Pennsylvania, is bigger than anything in any of the states. Our legislators get $84,000 salary, $157 a day when they work. The only state in the nation that gets any more is California. They get $95,000 a year, but only get $141 a day per diem. In all actuality, we're probably tied for the most expensive government in the nation. And what are we getting for what we're paying for? Nothing. Another article. Shortfall in government spending, in governor's spending plan. Budget shortfall, that's $1 billion and growing in his present budget. He's got to make this up. He's going to look for us to dig in our pockets. They don't know how to cut back. They only how to, as lobbyists today, if you saw on TV, I caught it on PCN. They were in the rotunda. I guess it was PSEA. They had a pie, and the symbol was grow the pie, and the guy behind the speaker with the big scissors, stop cutting the spending. Grow the pie, stop cutting the spending. That's all we can think about. Where do we get the money to do what we want to do, what we want to expand? Medicaid is just another example. Welfare reform. I'll tell you what, I was in some of these places in Reading. Phil talked about it tonight again. I cannot believe how we've taken the lowest economic level in this state and converted these people into subhumans. They walk away from houses after they're in the hole in their mortgage. They're not their mortgage, but their rent. And even at that, it's Section 8 money. They walk away. They leave everything. The food, the furniture, the televisions, wash machines, dryers. They go rent another place and start all over again. And they want to talk pension reform on the 24th. Our legislative committee's going to Harrisburg. There's a meeting up there. Terzai, the majority whip in the House, is going to be the speaker. And he's going to hear from me, I guarantee you. We've taken a lot of pictures, and they're going with me.
Right, if I can interject, our own governor's number for how much debt we're in to the pension crisis is $13,000 per household. Every single household in Pennsylvania, to pay off the current debt, not the growing debt, is $13,000 per household. That's the official number, because I think like about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we were just saying 8 or 9,000. It's now $13,000 as an official number to pay off. That's how serious this is. And when Ron talks about the per diem, that amount equals to that amount equals to $43,000 per year for each state legislator, whether they drive to Harrisburg that day or not. They don't turn in any receipts. It's tax-free, $43,000 extra. that they get to put in their pockets, turning 0 receipts. Doesn't matter if they go to Harrisburg or don't even get out of bed that day.
That's not more than 20 minutes. I talked about cost of government. In 2006, I wrote the first resolution for another organization about their midnight pay raise. And this went viral. Well, they finally backed off. Now, what did they do with that pay raise? Some declined, some turned it in, others said they gave it to their charity. I don't care what they did with it. They voted themselves a pay raise in violation of the Pennsylvania Constitution. Now they had to scamper around how to get out from under it. And that's how they got out from under it. They should have been jailed. They violated their oath. They violated the Constitution. It didn't matter to them. Cost of legislature. 2008, the newspaper now is talking about the cost of legislature. We got to do something about it. 2008, I wrote an article, a resolution. Pennsylvania in 2006, cost of the legislature, $23 for every Pennsylvania resident. By comparison, the second most expensive government in the nation was California, $10.82 per capita. We are 2.5 times more expensive just to operate the government than any other state in the nation. These guys are thieves, I'm telling you. They're not legislators. They're making a heck of a good living, and we keep digging in our pockets to make sure they can cover their bills. Enough on that. Pensions. I've said it more than once. I've said it here. They're now worried about the PSERS and SERS pension problems, public employees. Remember in 2001, they voted themselves a 50% pension increase and gave the teachers 25%. I almost look at that as payoff money or hush money. You got yours, now you just keep your mouth shut, and we'll all live happily ever after. Now they're $50 billion in the hole, and we got to figure out where they're going to get the money. I go back to Article 2, Section 8 of the Constitution. Salary and benefits, salary and mileage, and no other compensation whatever. That's what the Constitution says. Now, it was challenged. The Supreme Court ruled that pensions were not part of benefits, and therefore they could have their pensions. I go back, and I wrote back to Lieutenant Governor Cawley. I said, look, you took an oath to the Constitution. I read the Constitution, and it clearly has nothing to do with benefits. The Supreme Court is complicit in violating my Constitution. They're under the pension program, by the way. That's the same Supreme Court that, as corrupt as they might be, we already put one of them in prison, but they have no real concern about what's right or wrong. It's what suits. And that's the way the pension went down. You talk about corruption. Pennsylvania corruption. Article, one after the other. Harrisburg. This is a rat bumps of the Pittsburgh Tribune. Pennsylvania paid initiated taxes because the state public corruption is among the highest in the nation. Says a scholarly study based on data from the Justice Department. Pennsylvania is 5th in the nation for corruption. 5th in the nation. The most expensive government in the nation, and we're 5th in corruption. Can you put 2 and 2 together? We are only right under Illinois. That's Chicago. Everybody thinks Chicago's the most corrupt. We're almost tied with them. It's unbelievable what is going on behind our backs, and we just put up with it. Well, I could go on. We got more. You know, the 5 in Philadelphia now. They have video of these people taking bribes. 5 politicians. The AG doesn't want to prosecute. Now, there's a race part of that whole thing, because the 5 that accepted this on video are black. So, is this race component the reason you won't prosecute? It's because they're fellow Democrats. The black district attorney in Philadelphia wants them prosecuted. A black district attorney wants 5 blacks prosecuted for corruption. Every time somebody corrupt. If they're white, they're crooks. If they're black, it's racial. Now, look, I'm not racist at all, but I'm sick of this hiding behind the race card. Right up to the top. What did we put in prison lately? As you know, from these past years, all those politicians that took their turn having to serve time, it's like we elect people for 2 terms, 1 in office and 1 in jail. Remember these guys: John Frizzell, Philadelphia, House Speaker. Remember Jim Bill DeWeese, former Speaker. Ori Melvin, State Supreme Court. Mike Feehan, Democrat whip. Pennsylvania Turnpike, the whole commission, the whole gang was corrupt. All these guys served time. We elect them, they eventually serve time. Yeah, Pennsylvania's the 5th corrupt state in the nation. It's all evident by some of the results in some of the articles. Okay. Now I'm fired up. We have a governor now that is actually so far behind in the polls. I don't know what his chances are of getting reelected, but it's got to be somewhere between slim and none. And whose fault is it but his own? He's taken no lead. Pension crisis, property tax, or the rest of the issues. Even supporting the Marriage Act. He's just hiding, hoping he can skip through this and get reelected and nobody would notice he hasn't done anything. I remember when Ridge was governor and the House and the Senate was Republican. The same thing happened. I called it the do-nothing government, and what happened? All 3 were replaced by Democrats. The House took over, the Senate was taken over by Democrats, and the governor was taken over by Democrats. We're going to see the same thing happen again. And if you get Governor Wolf, I assure you, all these issues I brought up, they're going to be pushed aside. The PSCA is going to get what they need, and this pie will grow us, as I watched on TV today. Okay, now, what's my point? We have things we got to change. We know that. But we must take the lead. Those people in Harrisburg are not going to take the lead. They're happy the way things are. And we need to address them one at a time or all at once. Our legislative committee, and we are attacking. We have one assigned to the pensions. We got one assigned to right to work. We got one assigned to property tax. We're now looking into the cost of government issue, and that's going to be an issue. We formed a local issues committee. The local issues is another major thing that's taking place now. I only brought one item up, Rawa. Rawa, you think it's a city problem? It's going to be a county problem, and it's coming quick, and it's going to be in your pocket. So, again, we're going to try to watch this, do what we can. Property tax. That's really what I'm supposed to be talking about, but I wanted to vent. Thanks for listening. Okay. Politicians now, and I think the Home Builders Association put out a news release just yesterday that the crisis now, the pension crisis and the budget are the issues. The Finance Committee wants to push everything aside. Not important. The property tax issue has been sitting in the Finance Committee for God knows how long. Well, there are 7 on that Finance Committee that simply won't do their job. They just soon see it sit there, and what happens is there's 24 co-sponsors to this, both Democrat and Republican. They can't do their job until the Finance Committee does their job. Until the Finance Committee votes it out of committee, it's going to sit there. It's going to sit there right through June, and it's going to die, and next year it's going to start over again. I've been at this heavily for 5 years. I feel like I wasted my life. This is nuts. I'm not going to do it another year. If these guys don't do something this year, boy, I'm ready for the revolution, because I'm tired of talking to these guys and getting nowhere with them. They just don't think that it matters to anybody out here, but it certainly matters to Berks County. So, the pension's a crisis. Yeah, the pension's a crisis. They created the system, they spent the money, and now that the money's spent, now they got to solve it. What's our problem? Our pocket, our wallet, that's not important. The pension, that's the problem. That's the crisis, and that's something they gotta maintain. They wanna talk PSERS and SERS. They never bring up the fact that their pension's in the same hole as the rest of them, and they created it. Teachers didn't create it, public employees didn't create it, they went along with it. The politicians created the problem. Now, we're supposed to put up with this, okay. We got a system we put together for tonight. Your legislative committee, your board of directors, along with Berks Tea Party and Ray Foster. We worked on this several weeks to come up with a system where we can take another shot at these guys in the property tax. So, what we intend to do, I got 2 letters here. I'm going to read them, so you don't have to read them. One letter goes to the campaign manager of Tom Corbett. We got 150 of these back there, all these letters. 5 members in the finance committee that are sitting on this bill, and of course Corbett, who's leading from behind. He won't take the lead on anything. He thinks he's going to skip through this and not serve as governor, get something on my desk, I'll sign it. I think there's a guy in the White House, he pulls the same stuff. Okay. This goes to Michael Varley, Governor Corbett's campaign manager. As Eric Cantor just found out, Governor Corbett must remember who voted him into office and why in order to win re-election on November 4th. I'm a grassroots voter and can't help Governor Corbett win on November 4th, but I need a reason to vote for him. So I ask you, why should I vote to re-elect Governor Corbett? Governor Corbett has not defended the Voter ID Act or the Defensive Marriage Act. Governor Corbett has not supported right-to-work paycheck protection, welfare fraud elimination, or SB 76, the school property tax elimination bills. All of this is contrary to the will of the people. Governor Corbett needs to publicly support SB 76 and get it out of the Senate Finance Committee for the floor vote by the end of June 2014. Governor Corbett needs to get it into the House of Representatives for a floor vote before the 2014 general election. To win re-election, Governor Corbett needs to support the support of Tea Parties and PCTA members across the Commonwealth. His public support for SB 76, coupled with using the bully pulpit on the leadership in the Senate, and will send a message across the state that he's focused on the people's most significant issue. If this happens, his grassroots re-election support, including my own, will see a significant turnabout. Sincerely, and I'm asking you folks to get one of these letters back there before you go home and put your name on it and get an envelope, hand filled in. They're going to look very personal, and we're going to lambaste Governor Corbett with that letter. Second letter is going to the 5 senators that are sitting on this bill and not doing their job. And their job is to get a bill out of the committee for a floor vote and discussion and get over the House. That's why they're highest paid in the nation. That's what they're supposed to be doing. This goes to, typically there's 5 senators. This one has to be addressed to Bob Telpitz, but it reads, Dear Senator, the Senate is waiting. Let's move this bill to the floor for an up or down vote by the Senate. How many years must I be expected to accept the state government focusing on re-election, but little regard to the people's business? You've forgotten that doing the people's business is what you were asked and elected to do. Pennsylvania voters are not ignorant of the fact that Pennsylvania senators' salaries, perks, and pensions are among the highest in the nation. Pennsylvania voters also know that Pennsylvania government operation cost is among the highest expensive in the nation. What should you be doing to earn your money? Everything you can to get SB 76 out of committee and onto the floor for a vote. no matter the outcome. I'm not asking you to support SB 76. I'm asking you to uphold your oath and allow government to function as is expected. A bipartisan list of the co-sponsors represents half of the Senate body. I expect all of them to do their job. Getting the bill out of committee and onto the floor for a vote is allowing the democratic process our founders gave us to function. Please feel free to contact me at a phone number and an email address signed again by you. Look, your committee has done everything it possibly could do. We are tired. It's time for you folks to get out of the stands, get on the playing field, and let the governor and let these senators know that you're out here and you're fed up and you want them to do their job and earn their money. And you just can do one thing tonight before you leave. I'm not asking you to do it. I'm telling you to do it. I want these letters filled out, and if you don't mail them here, you can take them home and mail them. But all 5 of these senators got to hear from us, and so does the governor. So I ask you before you leave tonight and after our program is through, whatever it takes, we'll be here as long as it takes to fill out these letters. Well, I've been back there manning the table. They have these letters. They're all ready to go. We're only asking you to be participating. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Just as a note, we don't have to go to Philadelphia for our corruption. I urge each and every one of you to go to the Berks County official website. Go onto the voting, I forget the next, go there like, get the voter registration area. Right there highlighted, you can pull down the corruption that took place that's under current federal investigation with the mayor of Reading, taking a trip to Philadelphia, picking up a check for $30,000 from the IBEW. This is all on the website. This is not speculation or hearsay. Picking up a check for $30,000. That same day, somebody wrote 2 checks back to 2 candidates in Philadelphia for city council for $10,000 each. This says that in the report about somebody. No one has admitted to writing the other checks. But mind you, no other monies were in the campaign fund account for that $30,000 donation. It was money filtered through Vaughn Spencer's campaign account back into the Philadelphia, and then he got to keep $10,000. Several people signed checks for the campaign fund. So I really urge you to look that up, because you don't have to leave the county for government corruption. And it's posted on the website, so obviously the people in the district attorney's office, either with the Fed or whoever told them to post that, really wants to get some money. Tonight we have 2 guest speakers. Both of them have very rich and illustrious backgrounds. Our first speaker is John McManus. He was born in Brooklyn. He's a member of the National Council of the John Birch Society. He's been a member since 1964. He served various positions with them. He was appointed the Society's Public Relations Director. He's the author of 5 books. And one of his latest books was William F. Buckley Jr., Pied Piper for the Establishment. And the floor, the podium, the stage, it's now yours. If you want to add more about your background, feel free to do so.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a delight to be here. It's the first time I've been in Reading, Pennsylvania. I happen to live in Massachusetts. I operate all around the country. Somebody asked me one time, what do you do for a living? I said, I ride airplanes. But I live right next door to a community called Reading, Massachusetts. So there's more than one to say that. Now, I'm supposed to have an opponent here, but maybe it's going to be an empty chair like our friend Clint did. Or maybe it's that he doesn't want to sit to the right of the John Birch Society. I'm also living in the Boston area, and I'm delighted to see all you folks with Patriot shirts on here. Obviously, you root for the New England Patriots, and that's good. The government is way on the way to total power. And the reason that we're here tonight is to discuss what to do about it. I want to start off with, well, first of all, I want to also mention that we have a book table back here. And you can pick up some of the Berks Society literature. You can pick up our attitude about Constitutional Convention, which is the subject of the debate tonight, certainly. But there's a lot more there. There are DVDs. We sell those for a pittance. You can pick up DVDs on a variety of subjects. You might even find some that I've put together. The one thing he left out in my introduction is I had 3 years in the Marine Corps as a lieutenant. Never served in combat. I was in between Korea and Vietnam. I didn't have to shoot at anybody, but I was ready if called upon. Now let's start off with a philosophical point here. And the point is very simple. America became great not because of what government did, but it became great because of what government was prevented from doing by the Constitution. And so we want to keep the Constitution. We want to make sure. Now there is a lot of talk about a Constitutional Convention and other things, but we don't want to lose the Constitution because it's a standard by which to measure performance of elected officials. We publish a Freedom Index, and that the voting score of all 435 in the House of Representatives and all 100 in the Senate. And when our people show up at a town meeting where a congressman or a senator is speaking to the public, and he sees that these people have all been given a copy of the Freedom Index, which rates them on their voting score, most of them begin to shudder. Now, we want the Constitution because it's a grant of limited power to the nation's federal government. Limited power. It's a restrainer of government's always voracious power grabbing. Now, there are some people who claim to want improvement, and I'm glad of that. I'm glad that they want to see improvement in government, not only at the national level, but as has been said here, you need it at the state level as well. But our fear is that you open up the Constitution for a Constitutional Convention, and you might have complete overhaul of the document. And that's what we are opposed to. That, I guess, is what we're going to really be debating about. There's only been one Constitutional Convention in the history of our country. And it was in 1787 when the Constitutional Convention was convened to revise the Articles of Confederation, which was the government structure under which we fought the war for independence. And when they got to Philadelphia, the members of this Constitutional Convention realized that they had no limits on them, that they could do whatever they wanted. So what they did was cancel the Articles of Confederation, and they changed the requirement for unanimous approval of all the states to 3/4 of the states needed for approving the new Constitution and adding any amendments to it. There is no safeguard once you have a Constitutional Convention, which is why there has never been one in the history of our country ever since 1787. The Constitution is not at fault. The Constitution, if it were obeyed, would see the federal government 20% its size and 20% its cost. That's what we work for in the John Berks Society. Now, the proponents of a they sometimes say it's a convention of the states, not a constitutional convention. There's no difference. The terminology, the words are a little bit different, but it's the same thing. They say that states can control a constitutional convention. No, they can't. Once it starts, it is its own boss. A con cannot be limited. State ratification, they say, well, we'll have state ratification, whatever they come up with has to be ratified, except that the Constitutional Convention can do away with the ratification by the states. And that isn't thought of. People don't even consider that. In other words, a constitutional convention can change the entire Constitution. Now, I have a long list of people who are in favor of a constitutional convention, and I have another long list of people who are opposed to it. And there are people on the left that are opposed to it, and there are people on the right who are opposed to it. Same on the people who oppose it. So we've got a situation going on here where there seems to be confusion, which is why I've been traveling the country speaking about this subject in many states, and I'm glad to be here in Pennsylvania to do it. Spoke last night in Coltsville, Pennsylvania, yesterday afternoon. Now, on whose authority am I saying that the Constitution Convention cannot be limited? Well, former Chief Justice Warren Burger of the Supreme Court of the United States wrote in a letter when somebody asked him for his opinion on the subject. And he said, and I quote, "The participants in the Constitutional Convention of 1787 had no authority to write a constitution. They were authorized only to revise the Articles of Confederation. But when they got to Philadelphia," he said, "they paid no attention to those limits and wisely threw the whole thing away and wrote the Constitution." Now, to think that we would have the kind of people who in 1787 put together the Constitution of the United States that we have, to think that we would have the same kind of people is a pipe dream today. What we've got to do is to get all of the people in government to obey the Constitution. And as has been said, you've got to get the people in Pennsylvania to obey your Pennsylvania Constitution. I told you I live in Massachusetts, and sometimes people say, "How can you live in Massachusetts? You're president of the John Berks Center. You live in Massachusetts." I said, "Wait, you got me wrong here. You don't realize I like to work behind enemy lines." And boy, are they ever, right? Now, much of the discussion for a constitutional convention centers on, let's have a balanced budget amendment. The budget of the United States government is way out of control. They admit to $17.5 trillion, an incomprehensible amount of money. But if you add already existing requirements for pensions and for Social Security and Medicaid and so forth, you're talking well over $100 trillion. There used to be a program in the education department, they called it No Child Left Behind. It should be applied to the debt, because none of the children of today are being left behind. They are burdened with the debt that we've allowed to build up. So let's talk about the balanced budget amendment. All right, first thing is expecting government officials today to honor an amendment when they've already don't honor the Constitution makes no sense at all. So adding another amendment to the Constitution, forget it, right? They wouldn't obey that either. Some balanced budget amendments allow 60% in Congress to override it. Well, based on what you've got down there today, you could probably get 60% to override a balanced budget amendment. Some people call for tax increases if budget isn't balanced, even steering taxing authority to the executive branch where it doesn't belong. And these are people who are in favor of a constitutional convention, and they don't even consider these points. Some say that a balanced budget amendment doesn't have to be balanced if there's a war or a national security threat, like what's happening in Iraq today. Right? They say this is a national security threat, so we're starting to send more troops into that. Right? Our point in the Berks Society is bring them home. Bring them all home from everywhere. Some say the balanced budget amendment provisions wouldn't take effect for 5 years, meaning more trillions would be added to the already enormous debt. Some say that the way to get around the deficit problem is to declare some expenditures off budget. Oh, okay. So we can say that all of the military spending for being policemen of the world, we'll put that off budget and it won't even count, and that way we'll schmooze the general public. And then finally, balanced budget amendments propositions generally ignore the enormous deficit already accumulated, $17 trillion. Okay, now, what is the proper way of looking at this thing, in our view, instead of an amendment to the Constitution? I am not in favor, I am not opposed, I should say, to amendments to the Constitution. I would like to see an amendment to cancel the 16th Amendment. I'd like to see another amendment to cancel the 17th Amendment. That would be the income tax and the direct election of senators. Right? That process has been followed. Right? We once had an amendment to the Constitution banning the production and use of alcohol. And several years later, some of my Irish confreres, I think, got ahead of it. They got their Irish up and they saw to it that it was amended. So they amended the Constitution again to cancel the other amendment. Now, there are only 27 amendments to the Constitution of the United States. The first 10 are the Bill of Rights, and I consider that part of the original Constitution, because if they hadn't promised to put a Bill of Rights after they had put together the Constitution, it never would have been ratified. So really, there are only 17 amendments, and 2 of them I just talked about. One was prohibition, the other was to cancel prohibition. So that means that there were only 15 amendments. So 15 amendments to the Constitution of the United States in 230, what, years? It was a pretty good document to begin with, wasn't it? Let's not tinker with it. So what should be done? All right, the John Berks Society says Congress can cut spending for unconstitutional programs, and especially can the House of Representatives. I'll get to that. And the second is that Congress can nullify laws and programs. All right? Let's talk first of all about what Congress can do. Article 1, Section 7 of the U.S. Constitution says all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House. If the House will not originate a bill for foreign aid, there's nothing the Senate, the President, the Supreme Court, or the New York Times can do about it. The power of the purse is in the House of Representatives. And a majority in the House of Representatives is 218. Ladies and gentlemen, that's doable. 218 people who will say, all right, no more foreign aid, no more federal involvement in education and housing and transportation and medicine and on and on. No more undeclared wars that have to be paid for. The power of the purse resides in the House of Representatives, and the Senate can't do anything about that, the President can't do anything about that, and neither can the Supreme Court. That's what should be done instead of a balanced budget amendment that is flawed at the very beginning. All right, the second thing we want to talk about is nullification. A few years back, there was a piece of legislation called the Real ID Act. It was to be a federal government identification for every citizen. And when we were talking about that, everybody was always saying, well, that's just like they did in Nazi Germany, where the Nazis would stop anybody and say, your papers, please, right? So real ID was not a good idea. It's not a bad idea to ask for an ID if people are going to vote, and I'm very much in favor of that. Right? So the Real ID Act, what happened? A lot of states refused to go along. One after another said, no, we're not going to implement this. And the federal government backed down. Now, that wasn't a formal nullification, but it was a nullification. That kind of thing can be done again. Nullification, according to James Madison one time said, well, first of all, about the Constitutional Convention, Madison said, having witnessed the difficulties and dangers experienced by the first convention, 1787, which assembled under very propitious circumstances, I should tremble for the result of a second. Now that's James Madison, the father of the Constitution. He would tremble at the idea of a second constitutional convention. He talked about there were very propitious circumstances. What were those propitious circumstances? Well, one of them was the leadership of George Washington, who was so heavily respected that when he entered the room, everybody subdued their voices or shut up completely. The leadership of George Washington, something we very much benefit from even today. And I've been asked many times on radio talk shows, who was the best president we ever had? I said Washington, and we've been going downhill ever since. Right? Okay, so let's look at some numbers. Let's look at some numbers. If you rely on the Constitution to cut back government size and cost, you need 218 in the House. You don't need any in the Senate, and there's no role for state ratifications. So 218 can do it. If you go the balanced budget amendment and you add that to the Constitution, you're going to need 290 in the House to vote for it, you're going to need 67 in the Senate to vote for it, and then you're going to need 38 state ratifications. Well, let's say that there's, well, we've got 50 states, and let's just say that there's 100 state legislators in each of the 50 states, right? And you need how many of them? You need thousands, right? So when you add it all up, it's 218 if you go the route we suggest in the House. Or if you go the other route, you need 290 in the House, 67 in the Senate, and thousands of state legislators. Don't the numbers speak loudly? They do to me. I hope they do to you. Madison, who I think deserves our attention, you know, after he was the leader of the, one of the leaders of the Constitutional Convention, he took the notes on the Constitution, and therefore he actually wrote what was decided upon, and he became known as the father of the Constitution. He would tremble for another constitutional convention. But he also said something about nullification. He said nullification of a law can belong rightfully to a single state as one of the parties of the Constitution. The state not ceasing to avow its adherence to the entire Constitution by nullification of a particular thing passed by the federal government. There's a wonderful book that was published not too long ago called Nullification by a good friend of mine named Tom Woods. Tom Woods, who came from Reading, Massachusetts. He's an amazing guy. Tom Woods got a degree from Harvard, and he went to a couple of other Ivy League colleges, and he came out of it all a screaming, hardcore constitutionalist, which is really amazing. So I recommend his book very much. The book is simply called Nullification. Now, some of you may remember a man that was nominated for a seat on the Supreme Court, a man named Robert Bork, B-O-R-K. It would have been good to have him on the Supreme Court. He's a pretty good sound thinker. But they asked him one time what he thought about a constitutional convention. And he said, "It is my view that a federal constitutional convention could not be limited to a single issue," which some people say it could be. No, it can't. He said the original Philadelphia Convention went well beyond the purposes for which it was called, and nobody has suggested the Constitution is a nullity for that reason. Nobody. I can't repeat too often, a constitutional convention is essentially a sovereign body. It can do whatever it wants to do. And who would be a part of it today? Nancy Pelosi? Harry Reid? Eric Cantor? No, not Eric Cantor. He might not be chosen today. Right? Ladies and gentlemen, Constitutional Convention is almost a suicidal path to follow. And we don't want it. And we've been very active. John Birch Society over the past 20, 25 years has persuaded 18 different state legislatures to wipe the slate clean of all constitutional calls that they have made. All constitutional calls. Now, some of those were for opposing flag burning. There were some that were opposing abortion. We're not in favor of flag burning. We're not in favor of abortion. We're not in favor of a lot of these things that people are offering constitutional convention and constitutional amendments for. Right? The problem isn't the Constitution. The problem is getting those people in government to obey the Constitution. One of the best things. One of the best things to out through our New American Magazine, rating all congressmen and all senators. Right? Now, I know you've got problems here in Pennsylvania. I listened very intently to what the gentleman had to say. We've got the same problems in Massachusetts, and a lot of other states have similar problems as well. But ladies and gentlemen, the battle is to retain the U.S. Constitution. Right? That's the real battle. So I will put in a small pitch here that you take a look at the John Birch Society book table back there, and then maybe some of you might even want to consider joining the Birch Society. I'm not saying to leave this organization. This, to me, looks like something that ought to be in every community. Right? Good for you to have the Patriots of Berks County? Berks. Right. Sometimes I have to try to remember where I am. I travel so much. Anyway, don't leave this organization. But you can be in the Birch Society as well, right? And we would love to have you. So thank you very much. And I guess I got to turn it over now to my opponent, my colleague, whatever we want to call it.
Stephen Buchanan. Our next guest speaker is Roger Winger. And, you know, the prince got small here, sorry, Roger. He's a Convention of the States District captain for the 144th Legislative District in Berks County. But tonight he's in Berks County. And let's give him a big welcome coming out here. We're going to have our questions at the end so that we both get a little back and forth. If you have questions at the end.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Judith Delick and the board of Berks County Patriots for the opportunity to come here and speak to you. I think it's great that the Berks County Patriots decided that we would present both sides of the story at the same night, so you can make your own decision about what's going on. The first thing I want to say is that we're on the same page, the John Birch Society, on pretty much every other issue except this one. And that's why I think it's important that you understand both sides of the story and you can make your own decision. I'm not a professional speaker. I don't travel the country. I'm retired. I play senior softball in the mornings and I golf in the afternoons. I have a good time. But this is one issue that I believe that I have passion for because I believe it's one of the few things that can help us save this country. I mean, this country is gradually, it's moving further to the left and the progressive agenda just keeps marching on. And I like what John McMaster is saying, but if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting what we're getting. We already have a majority in the House, and we couldn't get people to have enough guts to stand up and say, hey, we want a small cut in the budget. They caved to a little bit of threats by President Obama. So the current system is not working. And unless we get a change in structure, we're not going to have any different results. The problem is Washington, D.C. is out of control, and they're not going to relinquish their power. They expect Congress to pass amendments. It's just not going to happen. And I know in my district in Pennsylvania, my congressman, he basically said one thing, and when he got to Washington, he did a whole 180 degrees. And he's a Republican. So you can't trust the people who are the incumbents. And most of the time, incumbents win and go back to Washington. So the problem is systemic, it's in Washington, and the solutions aren't going to come out of Washington. We have a regulatory crisis. There's 170,000 pages of federal regulations that have issued. If you want to buy those, it costs you $2,800, and it occupies 30 feet of bookshelf space. And in addition to that, they issue 80,000 pages of revised or new regulations every year. No wonder we're not competitive in business anymore. How can we stop this? Well, if you look at the Constitution, there's a lot of restrictions of saying what the federal government can't do and what's the power of the states. But they've taken over that power. And how did they take over that power? We're not living under the Founders' Constitution. I wish we were. I wish we could live under that Constitution, but we're not. We're living under the Constitution as interpreted by the Supreme Court, period. There's so many decisions the Supreme Court has made that has basically moved us forward toward the progressive agenda. It's incredible. The decision-making process, they've totally reinterpreted the Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause to make anything that federal government does legal. And John already mentioned the debt crisis. We're at 17.5 trillion and counting, and it's not going to stop. They're not going to stop themselves. In the past 50 years, the budget has been balanced only 5 times. And to think that the federal government's going to go ahead and do that on their own, it's not going to happen. We have a majority in the House right now, and we think that they couldn't even pass a slight reduction in the budget. It's not going to happen with today's environment. So let's talk about Article 5. What is Article 5? I'll read the direct verbiage of Article 5. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution. And that's the way we got the 27 amendments we have there. 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate approved the amendment, and then it was sent to the states for approval. The second part of Article 5 is what we're talking about here. It's to call a convention of states. And it reads directly, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all the intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as to one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by Congress. So Congress, if 34 states apply, 2/3 of states apply, Congress shall call the convention, and they get to pick the mode of approval. And I'll get into a little later what the history behind this and what the facts are about what Congress can and cannot control in a convention. And by the way, this is not a constitutional convention. And we have some literature that Sue, our coalition director, will be handing out, which shows you it is not a constitutional convention. Basically, the process is 34 states submit an application for the same issue. Right there, that tells you there's a limitation to what they can talk about. If they're not for the same, look online. How many applications have been placed?
You just read it. You read exactly what it said.
Right, they can propose amendments.
Go ahead.
Right. Congress is required to call a convention. The people who go to the convention are selected by the state legislatures. And they actually sign a commissioning document, which limits the scope of what they can talk about. If 38 states ratify the proposed amendments because part of the Constitution, Congress decides the date, location, time, duration of the convention, and method of approval. That's it. That's all Congress gets to do. And I'll get into that a little bit later about what the legal facts are about that. Article 5 is the check that the founders gave us to the Constitution. Without Article 5, the Constitution never would have been approved. Because you had Federalists, you had Anti-Federalists, and the Federalists said, well, we're very disjoint as our 13 colonies. We need to find a way to unify ourselves. But the Anti-Federalists said, well, we don't want a big and powerful government because we just came from it. So they were trying to balance that. And Article 5 is really what came in. And by the way, it was unanimously approved by 13 states when it was put into the Constitution. Because they felt they needed a way to balance the power of Congress in terms of changing rules and making amendments to the Constitution. Those are the facts. It gives equal power to the states to call the convention to propose amendments. Congress does not set the rules. 36 multi-state conventions have occurred in history. It's in this book. It basically documents the 36 conventions and the rules and laws surrounding these and what the facts are about what Congress can do and what cannot do. And this was prepared by Rob Daleson. He's a professor of law at Montana University, and he's a Rhodes Scholar. It's very clear. It's one state, one vote. Congress does not get to decide, well, we're going to allocate this on population. It's one state, one vote. That's the way all conventions have been run. Delegates are selected by the states. They're not selected by Congress. The founders wouldn't have put it in here if Congress got to pick the people. They're trying to balance the power. Let me give you two short examples of conventions. The first is called the Colorado River Compact. This occurred back in 1922. The 7 states that bordered the Colorado River were having major disputes about the usage of the water rights. And Congress basically said, we need to solve this. So they called this convention, and the 7 states that bordered came. It was one state, one vote. They came up with some recommendation to Congress. Congress adopted those rules. And those rules are still in effect today. And this has been challenged 9 times in front of the Supreme Court of the United States. And it's been upheld every time. So how can you say that if we don't know about conventions? There's a convention that was held in the 20th century, and the rules were upheld. Another convention I invite you to take a look at is the 1861 Peace Convention, or sometimes called the Peace Conference. It was called by Virginia, and 21 states attended. All the states were invited. And this was led by former President Tyler. There were former senators, former House members, former members of state Supreme Courts. 131 people came together. They wanted to prevent the Civil War. And they came up with 7 recommendations and submitted them to Congress. The trouble is, Congress was a lame duck Congress. They didn't want to do anything, typical just like today. And the resolution died. Unfortunately, when the new Republican Congress and President Lincoln came in, the attack was made, and basically the South started the war, but there was an effort to try and prevent it through a convention process, but Congress refused to act. And again, that was recognized, and President Buchanan invited them to the White House and talked about it. So the conventions have been a part of our history, and anytime there's any legal precedents, they're going to go back to history because there haven't been any recent conventions. If you look at Hamilton's Federalist 85 papers, he clearly talks about this is the balancing power that gives the states the same power as Congress. He's clear what the meaning of this was. And some people say, well, it's not written in Article 5, who controls what? How do you know what's going to happen? There's a lot of things that are not written in the Constitution because laws were recognized as the way they work. And I'll give you an important one. And that was innocent until proven guilty. Look in the Constitution. You can't find that anywhere in any of the amendments that talk about trial. But that was the law of the land at the time, and that's the law of the land now. So just because it's not written in Article 5, they go back to the history of what controlled the convention. We can shake our heads and we can disagree, we can agree to disagree, and that's why we're here, to talk about it, to make your own personal decision on this. States control the agenda. Think about this. If you're part of a company, and your company says, gee, the food in the cafeteria stinks, we think we might throw out ARA, let's get a bunch of people together to discuss the cafeteria. So every department says, hey, come on, you guys send somebody to this, we're going to have a meeting about improving the cafeteria. And your boss selects you, and you go to that meeting, and while you're at the meeting, you guys not only talk about food in the cafeteria, you say, well, I think I got to get a raise, I want a company car, and I'm going to have a 3-hour lunch. What do you think your boss is going to say when you go back to your department? They're going to say, you're not going to the next meeting because you didn't follow what you said you were going to say. And that's the issue. States can control it. They sign a legal document. They can't go outside of their legal document. If they do, they can be recalled immediately. True. Operating in secrecy is one of the things that some folks bring up as a concern. That's not going to happen today. In today's world of Facebook and Twitter and email, it's not going to happen. So the operating in secrecy, what's going to be talked at the convention is going to be clearly available to the public. The Ronald A. myth. 27 states have Republican-controlled House and Senate, and we're counting Nebraska in that because they only have one House, and that's controlled by the Republicans. So basically, you have a majority of states with a more conservative type leaning controlling the delegates that are going to go to the convention. That's why you're not going to have a runaway. And the last point that we're going to talk about is the original 1787 convention did not overstep its charter. And you're being given some partial information. I read you what Convention of States says, what Article 5 says about our Convention of States that proposed amendments. The original Constitution, or a CONCON, this is what the Continental Congress said to those delegates, and 2 other states wrote in their charter to the delegates. They said the sole purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation and reporting to Congress and the several legislatures such alterations and provisions therein as shall, when agreed to in Congress and confirmed by the states, render the federal Constitution